is generally known as the old part of Salzburg, and this area precisely is known as the Mozart Square. We have the statue of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in the middle. The statue as such dates back to 1842, the same year the opening and inauguration took place in form of a music festival. The two sons of Mozart were also present at the time and were playing some of their own compositions. As you probably know, they were musicians themselves, but by far not as gifted as their father was. And such festivals were held more often in the time after that, and were probably the reason for the fact that at a later time the Salzburg Summer Music Festivals were founded. That was actually in 1920. The artist of the statue was a Bavarian one, based in Munich. His name was Ludwig Schwanthaler, and he was doing numerous statues back there and also sculptures. Now the area here has no doubt changed as from the end of the 16th century. Until that time this was all a build-up area, because this was actually the heart and the beginning of the so-called burghers' quarter. So the various guilds, the merchants, the money changers, people like that were first established here. And from here the so-called burghers' quarter was then expanding further towards the north alongside the river. And in that regard the various buildings along the streets were then constructed, and within the burghers' quarter we find even nowadays a rather typical medieval character with the narrow and the windy streets due to the lack of space. I mean, generally speaking, within the old part it was always a well-protected area, but there was never a great deal of space available due to the situation of having the mountains on one side and the river on the other side. And then again, for the burghers there was even less space available, and that's why they had to move together, and that's why they were actually living on a very narrow and tight space. So here the guilds, it was actually the guild of the textile weavers at one stage, and there was at the turn from the 16th to the 17th century a young Prince Archbishop by the name of Wolf Dietrich. And his idea it was then to modernize the city structure completely, and in that regard he was actually having numerous old buildings demolished in order to gain space for new modern buildings, and also to gain space for squares, which did hardly exist until then. So having all these existing buildings demolished and removed, since that time we have this square here. And also at the same time he gains space for that building there. That was one of his first constructions he was doing while he was in power, known as the new residential palace. It was only used briefly as the Prince Archbishop's Palace, and later on it was used as an administrational building. While presently there is construction work going on, and in the near future it will be there where we'll have the Salzburg Museum Carolina Augusteum, which is the Museum of History here in Salzburg, right? But here this is one of the results dating back to Wolf Dietrich's time, when he started to modernize and restructure the entire city. And the church here, the small pink one, is St. Michael's Church. It was the first parish church for the burghers here in Salzburg. Indeed quite an old piece of architecture dating back to 800 AD. Of course, at later times numerous alterations in regards of necessary renovations were done to the church then as well. But it was the first parish church as for the burghers here in Salzburg. And that square over there, we just did walk across it, that was the first official market square here in Salzburg, dating back to the 10th century. And that, during that early time, the same square was also used in order to practice justice. Justice in those days was always practiced on public squares, outside. Only at later times they were using buildings. To start with it was town halls or city halls, and even later it was then courthouse buildings, same like it happens nowadays, right? And that building with the huge painting there, there it was where the first town hall used to be. still today's building is not identical with the first town hall building, except the foundation, right, and the basement part. But the building as such is dating back to a later time. But it was there where for the first time ever a town hall used to be, right? So once again, new residential palace. From here we can actually see the tower with the glockenspiel on top quite well. And the glockenspiel did actually get installed at the very beginning of the 18th century. Consists of 35 individual bells, and they played 3 times every day, like 7 a.m., 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. And the music does get changed every month, so it's not one and the same piece they're playing throughout the whole year. What we have got compared to other cities, for example Munich or Nuremberg or Prague even, we haven't got any dancing figures, right? We have the glockenspiel, the bells only, no figures dancing around or doing anything silly, right? And this here on the left, that's the main facade of the former Prince Archbishop's residency, so that was the official residency, while the new one was only briefly used as such. But in there we'd find the former state chambers used by the Prince Archbishops for various activities, whether it was audiences, whether it was government meetings, whether it was representations, concerts, operas and so forth. Nowadays they're still used for weddings, for exhibitions, for concerts and fine dining parties. Indeed very nicely done up with stucco decorations, with frescoes, paintings and so forth. There's also an art gallery on the very top floor with a collection of paintings dating back to a time between 16th and 19th century. The building as such is indeed very big. It does extend quite a long way to the back. Both buildings were actually started under the reign of Wolf Dietrich, the one who started with the big changes and modification of the city, but the new residential palace was the only construction which did actually get completed during his reign. All the others he started but was not able to complete because he had to resign, right? There was some troubles with the neighbors in Bavaria about salt mining, salt trading and so forth. I mean, Salzburg and Bavaria, they had in those days quite often problems like that. And so they captured him and then they put him into jail. He had to resign and that was the end of his career practically. Right, now we have a beautiful fountain here. Doesn't look so impressive presently because of the work going on, but by the end of the month they keep telling us it'll be all gone and they should have completed the renovation work. But it is indeed a very good example of Southern European flair, like you would find it in Italy or Southern Europe in general, right? And that's one of the improvements we have, demonstrating that we have in Salzburg actually a rather strong Italian influence, right? In the past we had many Italian artists doing the various jobs here, and that does actually include the fountain as well, so it was done by Italian artists, Antonio Davide, Tommaso di Verona. It's made out of local marble coming from the nearby area, the Untersberg mountain, as a matter of fact. And are you aware of Sound of Music?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Heard about it? Good. Well, then you probably remember having seen that fountain, because that was to be seen in the movie at the time when Maria was skipping along here and splashing with the water. There's no water presently, unfortunately, but you were then able to see the water horses at the bottom quite clearly in the movie, if you remember. And if you don't remember, it's time to see the movie again, right? And this square here is also the result of Wolf Dietrich's time, because this was until then used for something completely different. I understand you're all undertakers. Well, you should have been here about 400 years before, because this was once the site of the cemetery, right? The cemetery of the cathedral. And Wolf Dietrich's idea was to move it. He had all the graves and what did exist here formerly removed, and by doing that he gained the huge space, right? And ever since that time we have this large square here. As a replacement, he started a new cemetery on the other side of the river, known as the Sebastian Cemetery. And him, as one of the former Prince Archbishops, he's the only one actually buried over there, while all the other Prince Archbishops after him are actually buried at the cathedral, right? And then you notice indeed a big difference in space. Everything is rather large and spacious here, because this area, one could also call it the former government district, or the bishop's city, right? And right opposite, the Burgers Quarter, everything is very congested, very narrow and windy streets due to the little space they had available for themselves, right? Now let me take you around the corner inside the cathedral. Well, here we have the Cathedral of Salzburg, no doubt our main church, and today's construction is dating back to the beginning of the 17th century, and it was then the first so-called modern sacred construction at the area north of the Alps, while this new development and new movement, as with the beginning of the Baroque period, all started again in Italy. And it was in this part of Europe, like the northern part, or the area north of the Alps, for the first time that such a new and modern church was constructed, and it happened to be here in Salzburg. And that does actually prove that Salzburg always was a very important and strong center within the Catholic Church, right? It was important because Rome realized from here it was best to start the missionary work towards the Eastern European parts, right? That's why Salzburg was always, and since a very early time, a very important such center. And also this church, today's church, was under strong Italian influence. It was mainly Italian artists. The architect was Santino Solari. The various other artists, painters and stucco workers were Italians. Arsenio Mascagni was doing the majority of the paintings and frescoes in here, and so it was Italians doing the stucco work in here. But the actual history here in Salzburg regarding the cathedral is much, much older than the 17th century. It all started back in the 8th century. So during that early time, it was for the first time that a cathedral for the first time was constructed on the very same spot like we have today's cathedral. And the first consecration of a cathedral here in Salzburg took place in 774. Indeed, a very nice view looking up towards the fortress. The fortress is at the same time known as our landmark, and furthermore it's also known as one of the oldest and largest fortification setups in Europe. It does date back to the year 1077, and the first construction was started because of the investiture controversy between Pope and Emperor. And the Archbishop of Salzburg no doubt was on the side of the Pope and supporting the Pope. Therefore there was great fears that troops of the Emperor might also come to Salzburg, attack the city or possibly destroy it. And to have something to find shelter and good enough protection, they started as early as that with, for the first time with a fortress construction. And since it was always used for such purposes to find best possible shelter for the Prince Archbishop and his closest people, they were ever so often in the needs having to further fortify the fortress and expand it. And in that regard, there was indeed a very long construction period happening there. For more than 600 years they did actually construct it. The fortress was a couple of times under the stage of siege, but was never besieged, so it was indeed always a very safe setup. It was never used as the official residency by the Prince Archbishop. That was always down here. I did point it out to you earlier on, but whenever there was a dangerous situation, they would have gone up there and to find good protection. And we have a nice view here towards the Abbey St. Peter. This is part of the monastery St. Peter, and that's at the same time the first and oldest monastery here in Salzburg. It was founded at the end of the 7th century, and it is Benedictine monks living and working here ever since that time. So therefore this monastery is amongst the oldest still active monasteries in Central Europe. And we'll be walking through the cemetery St. Peter. Inside the cemetery it's not allowed to do any guiding, so I'll give you some information while we're still out here. And it is known as the oldest Christian burial place here in Salzburg, still in use. And in that regard you would actually find many family graves from families of Salzburg having lived here over many generations. And furthermore, the cemetery is surrounded by arcades, and inside these arcades at the vaults there is also family graves. There is a small chapel like this one there, the St. Margaret Chapel, end of the 15th century, so it's Gothic architecture, used as the funeral chapel, and only at times of funeral they would open the doors and use it. Other than that it's always closed. And furthermore, there's also a grave of an American Major General in there, Harry J. Collins. And he was here in Salzburg after World War II, during the occupation, and he was the commander of the Rainbow Division. They were stationed here, and he is actually buried there. He did later on get married to a lady here from Salzburg, and the two of them are actually buried in there. this building to my right is the back part of the first festival hall here in Salzburg, today known as the Small Festival. It dates back to 1924-25, but between then and now several alterations and changes were done to the festival hall, and a new change is going to happen here. We have a complete new festival hall for the big anniversary, Mozart anniversary in 2006. And this here is actually the entrance to the backstage area. So they are getting ready for the upcoming summer music festival starting the end of July. The organ above it is purely decoration only, so which would play that organ quite easily. And via these steps one could actually climb up to the top of the mount and either make your way across to the fortress or towards the north, towards the other area like München. This is part of the mountain in Mönchsberg, consists of sandstone, conglomerate sandstone, and here is one of the entrances to the inside where we have underground parking facilities. So there is inside the mountain space for about 1,500 cars. So the cars drive in from the other side, park inside, then you walk out here and you're in the middle of the city, so it's rather convenient. Keep it clean, keep the traffic, because inside the old part, as you saw so far, there's not terribly much space. One of the characteristics of the street are the many Rotha and gilt symbols. You find them all along the street above the shop entrance, and these gilt symbols were actually put up in order to inform the public in the first place, because in those days not too many people were able to read or write. And by looking at symbols it was then quite easy for everybody to get the necessary information. But nowadays it's more the decoration what's counting, right? But it is a very nice scenery, and I'm sure you enjoy it. And so we just take the passage through there into the street, and then I'll take you across the river to the other side. I'd like to show you Mirabel Gardens, and then we come back to this area and we will visit Mozart's birthplace after that. This is Mirabel Garden, and at the far end we have Mirabel Palace. It dates back to the beginning of the 17th century. It was started under the reign of Wolf remember, modernized. It was used as a summer and weekend residency. In the 18th century, the former smaller palace was then enlarged to its present size, and today it is used as the town hall or city hall. So the mayor's office is in there, plus numerous offices of various departments of the city council. And also chamber concerts take place in there. And the garden is a good example of typical Baroque layout, design work dating back to the Baroque time, like 17th, 18th century. So you find all the characteristics of that period, whether you look at the roundish shaped flower beds or the balustrades, the decoration of the statues and so forth. All this, the marble, they used, like the statues, the balustrades, decoration vases, all local marble once again. The statues you find around here are all figures of the Greek mythology, so numerous goddesses and gods, while the four larger statues surrounding the fountain are at the same time symbolizing the four elements like water, fire, air and earth. This building to my right, what we see here is of course of recent times like the 70s, but its basic construction is of the 17th century. It was in former times a small palace, while nowadays in there we have a part of the Mozarteum, that's the music academy of the University of Salzburg, where people from all over the world come to study music. Right? So they have offices there, they have library there, they have practicing facilities. That building over there, the grey one, that's the Marionette Theatre or the Puppet Theatre. It was founded at the beginning of the 20th century, and that was the theatre they used in The Sound of Music when they had the scene Lonely Gotha. Right? So that was actually filmed inside there. So it's a puppet theatre where they mainly have Mozart operas performing. Right? Tonight I see Don Giovanni. Right? And this here was actually also in The Sound of Music. You see the two statues here, the Borghesian fighters. Maria and the children, they gathered here and were trying to copy the two statues, right? Doing the same posing like the tour you see here. Right? You don't remember this?
No, but I'm going to have to go home and watch it.
You have to watch it again,
we're
right?
going to all go home and watch it.
Okay, folks. So this is Mirabel. Indeed, quite a nice and well-known setup. And like I said, it's one of the many sites dating back to the Prince Archbishop. We have Mozart's birthplace now right in front of us, the yellow building. And I'll take you inside and give you further information about Mozart and take you through the former Mozart apartment, which is nowadays known as the museum. Just a couple of things you need to be aware of. First of all, there is no elevators or escalators. We need to make our way up to the 4th floor, right? So it's steps only.